now. All right. So again, welcome everybody to the Meet the Mentors conversation here. My name is Kim Hockey, and I am the Associate Director of Alumni and Community Engagement for FCAT, the Faculty of Communication, Art and Technology within SFU. For those of you who are not familiar with what FCAT is, because we're kind of, I don't know, we're a step further even removed from your studies. We are the kind of the administrative body that helps to support the School for the Contemporary Arts, the School of Communication, and the School of Interactive Arts and Technology, as well as the publishing program and the Center for Digital Media. I'm very happy to be here today with you guys. We've got our three fantastic alumni who are going to be talking with you about their journeys since they have graduated from SFU. Before we even jump into bios and questions and conversation and all of that, I do want to acknowledge that the SFU campuses, all three of them, reside on the unceded and traditional territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, Katzie, Coquitlam, Kwantlen, Kakite, Semiahmoo, and Tawasin peoples. And these lands have been stewarded by Indigenous communities for thousands of years, and we honor their enduring connection to land, water, and all living things. And we express our continuing appreciation for their hospitality and resilience and wisdom with which they share with us. And I know that within the university that there are commitments towards reconciliation, and that I do feel personally that I want to continue working on creating safe space across all of our campuses for our Indigenous community members and creating opportunities for allyship within our programs. This is our second careers talk, which we are running to help promote the FCAT Mentors program and also to just create space for our alumni to come back and talk with our students and our alumni about what it is that they've experienced and share life's lessons that they have experienced along the way. What you need to know about the FCAT Mentors program right now is that it's very new and that all three of our fine panelists have offered to be mentors for either a current SFU student or for a recent alum. And Milton, Leslie, Kimia, thank you for offering to be not just a partner within these mentorship programs, but as well for coming and talking with us today. I do want to leave as much time as possible for conversation. So what I'll do is just jump into some quick bios and then to the questions. So in no particular order, actually, before I do, a quick comment is if you do have questions or comments, please do use the chat at any point. Our panelists will be reviewing as we go, and they can address questions throughout their commentary. Or if we don't have a chance to get to you, then I will prompt those questions at the end of our conversation here. As always, please keep all of the chatter within the chat respectful. And yes, to the bios. In no particular order, we have Milton Lim. Milton has a BFA in Theater Performance and Psychology from SFU. He is an award-winning digital media artist, game designer, and performance creator whose work blends publicly available data, interactive media, and gameful performance to explore social capital and big data culture. He has showcased his work globally from Canada to Europe, Asia, and South America. He is co-founder of the VideoCan National Video Archive and a creator of innovative projects like Culture Capital and Asses Masses, which received a National Creation Fund funding and is now touring internationally in more than 7 languages. Thank you, Milton. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
Next, we have Kimia Koochakzadeh-Yazdi. Kimia has her BFA in musical composition from SFU. She is an Iranian composer and performer who blends instrumental and electronic music to explore musical extremes and hybrid soundscapes. Incorporating her Iranian heritage and cross-disciplinary influences, she has collaborated on projects in dance, film, and theater. She is the co-founder of Fashion X Electronics, a collective merging fashion and electronic music. Her work has been showcased internationally, and currently she is a doctoral candidate in music composition at Stanford University. Welcome, Kimia. Yahoo! All right, and Leslie Kuny. Leslie graduated from SFU with a BFA in dance, and she's also a graduate of Grant MacEwan. She is the owner and artistic director of Absolute Motion Performance and Dance, a premier studio in South Surrey. With over 20 years in the industry, she is an award-winning dance educator, choreographer, and certified adjudicator known for her dynamic teaching and mentorship. Leslie champions a human-centered approach to dance education, fostering excellence through trust and humor. Her choreography and dedication to innovation have earned widespread recognition, including the Shine Dance Festival Mentor Award and the Surrey Now Leaders Coach of the Year. So welcome, everybody. Thank you for being here. Let's jump right in. I'm going to stop my share so we can see faces. And let's begin our questions. I'm going to put the very first one to you, Milton.
Sure.
Tell us about your career path since graduating from SFU.
Cool. So yes, I graduated SFU in 2012, and immediately I started working for SFU as the graduate program assistant. So that was like my part-time job. And just to kind of get it out the front, like graduating and not having a lot of money just meant that I had to work other jobs for a little bit. And I was able to still have an art practice, not even on the side, but like just like working concurrently with everything else in life. I was very lucky to have gone to SFU and have made a lot of connections, and we fostered those connections after school as well. And so my two collaborators, Remy Sue and Natalie Tinyan Gan, from dance and music respectively, we made an interdisciplinary arts company called Hong Kong Exile. And like any other kind of like young collective, we just did as many small self-produced shows as we could, riding on the coattails of many of our mentors in the community, things like the Progress Lab companies, if you're in the theater realm. And so Hong Kong Exile and I, we all did a lot of works for about 2 years. The timeline, 2014, the BC Arts Council Early Career Development Grant was announced, and many of my colleagues and I, we were very lucky to be the first ones ever to receive them. And those are grants that are $30,000 maximum to support subsistence costs for a whole year for young artists to do a mentorship, a residency, or an internship. Happy to talk more about those, but certainly that professionalized a generation of artists quite early. And so 2015, I was working a lot with Theater Conspiracy, who I was doing that grant with, focusing on documentary performance. And then alongside of the work of Hong Kong Exile, which was mutually supported by Theater Conspiracy, we were doing a lot of different shows. And 2016, the Push Festival agreed to have us in as the artist in residence, which was at the time an unfounded thing for young artists to be asked to do that, which propelled us into the international touring circuit. And so we started doing that. 2018 onwards was touring our works around between interdisciplinary contexts, dance, theater, sometimes music. And then 2018, I started working with my now frequent collaborator, Patrick Blencarn, and I started working outside of Hong Kong Exile a little bit more and more. And that's where I started to focus on games. At the time, I went from being a theater maker, trained as an actor, director, to then being someone who did more interactive media with things on stage. And then with Patrick, I started honing in on the idea of audience members also playing what this thing is. And so whether or not it's card games or tabletop role-playing games or video game for 7 hours played by an audience, one person at a time, all of those came from my history of working with theater and like a democratic and communal gathering space. But they landed in another love of mine, which was interactive media, which I learned after school, but was fed very much by this interdisciplinary kind of like pick whatever up and learn it kind of mentality. And since then, pandemic happened, and was already doing digital work, so I continued. And since then, I think the touring life has grown, and now, like many very fortunate artists who have been able to tour, some of the questions I have now are about systems change and like how do we look at arts leadership differently to also think about how does arts and culture intersect not just within the arts format but also more broadly politically and yeah, in terms of things from like zoning policies all the way to public facing education systems. So yeah, it's a little bit amorphous right now, but it all stems from being very inspired by things like the Push Festival coming out of school. Um, Happy to talk more about that in great detail, but that's a very general overview. End of thought.
Wow, that's great. You have really found some new opportunities. It feels like, Milton, like you've kind of been at the precipice of some major changes and have been able to take advantage of those opportunities. When there are certain things like, so you mentioned like you were the first artist in residence with the Push Festival. Like, how do you discover these things that have never happened before and place yourself to take advantage of them?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think we were very fortunate to be in a time where funding was announced. And if you look at like when certain companies kind of get their foot holding in the performing arts and when they become the companies that they are, obviously that comes a little bit around like opportunities around when the funding comes. That's, I would say, like half the conversation. And then the other half of it is like what are the partnerships and what are the coalitions that are built? And I want to give a shout out to Tim Carlson of then Theater Conspiracy, Joyce Rosario, who is then working then with Push, and then Norman Armour, who was with Push at the time as well. Um, all of them had looked to us and said, like, we want to engage with the younger generation, and we happened to be there. Mostly because we were doing a lot of different works. We were trying to output as many works as possible. And we looked at things like Company 605, who was at the time a young dance company. And we just saw how much they were outputting and how much they were just generating things. And I think as young artists, I would just encourage you to just make as many things as you want with the people that you want to make and make wildly and just put it all out there. And to keep talking so that your work is not just in a bubble. And I think, especially with the algorithmic kind of forces around us, sometimes it's very easy to only show it to the people around us. Um, but there are so many opportunities to keep exploring. And I really learned early the power of asking, to your point, Kim, about if there's something that you want to see in the world, don't just wait for someone to come up to you and offer it. You can just ask for someone to see if they can make it for you or you can make it for them and just make your own opportunities. And I think that's what SFU taught me how to do.
That's great. It comes back to that old adage, if you ask, the worst they can do is say no, right?
Totally. Yep.
But who knows what could happen. That's great. Thanks, Milton.
I
Kimia.
can actually
Oh,
give
yeah,
a quick example of that. There
of
was an
course. Yeah.
empty space that we walked by as Hong Kong Exile. We walked by the River Market in New Westminster, and it was an empty room. And then we just said, what if they had an artist in residence? Would that be so bad? So we asked them, and then they gave us a contract the next week with a couple $1,000s and said, yeah, take over the room for 6 months, and then just like be our artist in residence. And that would never have happened if we hadn't asked and just had this dream of about one thing that we could do. So,
Wow.
you might get a no here and there, but definitely just like make your own opportunities and like see what's up there and ask us too. Like if you have things that you want to try, um, keep dreaming big. Kind of thought. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Kimia, I'll flip the question to you. So tell us about what you've been up to since you've graduated from SFU.
Yeah. Um, that was so inspiring, Milton. Thank you. Um, I graduated in 2020, which was like I was telling Leslie and Milton before, it was mid COVID, early COVID. So I graduated and I didn't have a real graduation. And then I had a year off between starting my PhD program at Stanford and the undergrad. I finished my undergrad early. I didn't listen to my Sabrina Schroeder, like my primary mentor at SFU. I was like, I need to get out. I need to go to next step. I'm Persian. Like we have this mentality we have to get a PhD. The stereotype is very true. Um, and so I was like, I need to go. I need to go. And then now when I reflect back, I wish I had taken my time doing my undergrad and taking advantage of the resources. Um, I graduated, and then a year later, during that 1 year, I was working as a freelance thanks to Canada Council for the Arts and BC Arts, all the grants that you could get and like doing online. At that time, there was a lot of organizations doing online commissions, doing like make a virtual, not a virtual piece, but a fixed media piece, anything. And I had like, luckily, I was at that stage that I could brainstorm different ways of presenting my work that doesn't rely necessarily on live performers. I did that for a year, and then I started my PhD in September 2021, which is still in music composition. And that opened a whole different door for me because it's research and experimentation at the same time. Because it's a doctorate program, you get to our dissertation is making a giant piece, so we don't have to do a 200-page like a dissertation project. If we want, we can. But then at the same time, the program I am right now does a lot of electronic music, but more like on the technical side, like digital signal processing and audio programming and building instruments. And that opened a whole new door that I had never coded. I had never done any soldering, nothing, no electronics. And now I've gotten in the last 3 years, I've gotten into making wearable instruments. The collective that I have with my sister, which is called Fashion X Electronics, is making we started last year, wearable instruments for another discipline or myself. Well, our first event, we worked with dancers and choreographers. Our next event, which is going to be in September, It's going to be interactive sculpture. So we'll see what that's gonna happen to it. But in short, like if I hadn't started my PhD, I would not have gotten into any of the things that I do right now. I'm in my fourth year. I have technically one more year, hopefully two more. I don't want to leave. I'm not gonna rush this one. Yeah, and on the side, I've been doing composition and performing and doing residencies, going to festivals, all those things that you need to do to make your connection so you can live. Like you won't starve maybe to death after you graduate as a starving composer. Maybe. I don't know. We'll see. I'll let you know in 2 years' time if these connections will pay off or not.
We'll follow up. So I've got a couple of follow-up questions for you. So you mentioned that you completed your undergrad as quickly as possible, and that there were some resources that you wish that you had taken advantage of that you didn't. Could you tell us more about what maybe you had hoped to tap into, or what you would tap into now in hindsight?
Um, um, well, I've been told this word is not a good word, but like I feel like I'm still greedy to like I needed to take classes in psychology, in cognitive science, in I didn't take anything in CAT. I really wanted to do that. And those kind of things, I feel like I didn't take advantage of it because I could have taken because I had done all my units, but I still had one more year.
Hmm.
Um, or even spend more time with with the faculty or do more collaboration across like with theater, dance, film, which luckily I did a lot because of how SCA is structured and like you have to do interdisciplinary work. I got to do it, but I wish I had done more. And I think while I was graduating was a period of change, and I think now that I know about like there was a mixing and mastering, there's way more resources. So if I had stayed a year longer, I would have learned more, obviously. So I wish I had done.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I
There's
don't know, you
there's so
tell me
much out
that.
there, isn't there? Oh my gosh, like you could live your whole lives here. There's so many different opportunities out there, but you got to do what you got to do. So with your PhD program, so you mentioned like it was culturally important for you, like that was a thing that you wanted to do was move on to graduate studies to a PhD. What kind of criteria did you look for when you were choosing the program?
I applied to three school. I went to an Ivy school, and I wanted it was I oh, this is so super, but like it's gotta be honest, I just want an Ivy League school that would pay me enough to do a
Mm-hmm.
PhD. And it
Mm-hmm.
was like not in the middle of nowhere. And I had like know a little bit of like the alumni, the professors. I applied to UCSD. I got on the wait list. I didn't get in. Um, I know a lot of composers came out of it, which like I admire. So it was the people who came out of it. And I applied to Harvard. I kind of got in, but like that year because it was again COVID, it they were like, actually you got in, but like we don't have funding, so we're not gonna accept anybody. So I was like, okay. And then I got into Stanford. I was like, this is close to Vancouver. I can come back anytime I want. And then I was like, and it's sunny almost all the time. It rains a lot actually. But those were my criteria.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Leslie, so tell us about your career path since graduating from SFU.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I graduated from Simon Fraser University in 2007. Well, since then, it's been, as Kim mentioned, I have a BFA in dance. So kind of a very expensive piece of paper. However, I feel very fortunate that to this day, I do get to sort of like be like, see, I'm using it. And it's a matter of figuring out how you want to use it. So for myself, I did not go into a performance career as much as I had hoped to or had wanted to. Unfortunately, I didn't feel super supported or encouraged while at SFU in my program, that was a road for me. And since a teenager, I had worked with kids. I'd been an assistant dance instructor, and prior to university, oh my gosh, see, look, my brain has to go back a lot of years. I did teach independently like right out of high school, like 17 years old. I was teaching my own dance classes. So I was like, I like kids. I really like education. I had hoped to be a teacher initially. And then public schools being the way they are, I was like, no, thank you. So I was like, great, I can combine my two passions of education and the arts moving forward. So the reality of being a dance teacher is gig work and contracts, and you might be at a studio for a year. And so I kind of hopped around year to year. Some places I was lucky enough to stay on for 6-ish years. That was probably one of my longest stints. But yeah, it was contract work and trying to stay in the community. Like Milton said, I worked multiple jobs, so I couldn't just say I was a dance teacher. I actually got a chance to work for 2 dance nonprofits, the Vancouver Ballet Society and the Dancer Transition Resource Center, which were 2 great places. One, the Vancouver Ballet Society was right in the dance center. So that was like, it felt like I was really living in a hub of artistic expression. And I would ride the elevator with like dancers from Ballet BC because they were still in that space, which I was like, oh, like you have my dream job. But then I was like, maybe not. Like, yeah, so it was a lot of figuring it out, a lot of learning of, I like this maybe isn't quite the right fit for me. Learned a lot about contracts and what it means to be a contractor versus an employee, and funding and support for the arts. I really appreciated my time in the nonprofit sector because it really opened my eyes and offered me opportunity to learn like how to write a grant and work with archives and things like that. So it's been a broad knowledge of sort of learning on the fly, but using the basis of my degree in all of these aspects. And then, like a crazy person in 2019, a former colleague of mine reached out and said, hey, have you ever thought about opening a studio? And I was like, yeah, but it's really hard. I don't really want to do it on my own. And she said, yeah, me neither. So then we got to building a studio, which we opened in March 2020, which actually was incredibly successful. COVID was the best thing that could have ever happened to us. We slowed down and got to work and built a really, in a short time, built quite a successful dance studio. So I've been an artistic director since 2019. Unfortunately, I made the decision to leave that partnership because it wasn't morally and ethically in line with my standards. And I think a lot of that comes from my time at SFU and understanding, having a broader understanding of the arts community and what's expected and what's right and that sort of stuff. So then I opened my own studio after a somewhat lengthy legal battle just this past fall. So I have my own studio. It's just me. I'm the artistic director and owner, and I love it. And while I'm still collaborative, you know, when the hits the fan, I'm the one to take it. I prefer to be them that way. And then I can help mentor not only my students, but also my staff who tend to be younger. So I'm really moving into it's different. I've always felt like the kid, and now I'm like, oh no, like this is the new level of like, now I'm this old and I have this experience, and now I get to help the next generation, which is like really, really exciting. So yeah.
Wow. You have a fantastic, like dramatic rendition of how you represent all those events. So, I mean, you mentioned like, yeah, you had a person call you and say, well, let's start a studio together. I'm sure it wasn't that easy of a decision. What did you need to do to feel prepared to move forward with your own business?
Okay. Well, I think because it was something that was always on my mind, just because of the reality of the arts world. I was like, I'm going to make whatever course you take, you're going to make your own work, you're going to produce your own work. That's kind of the reality. So it was always in my mind that maybe one day I would own a studio. So it had already been in my hopper in terms of thought process. And then when a former colleague reached out, I was like, oh, this might be a really great opportunity. And I didn't realize all the information I had. Like, I really, when we came together, I was like, this is how I want it. These are how I want things to be laid out. This is the training module I'd like. I think, you know, having worked in the industry at that time for almost close to 20 years, I was like, I've seen a lot. This is what I like. This is what I don't like. And I didn't realize until I had that opportunity that I had all that information. And then I just put it together. And then it kind of felt like I was like, here you go. Like, I felt like we came at it from different angles. Whereas I was like, oh, this is a dream of mine I've had, and I really want to create the artistic vision behind it and the, encouraging younger people in the arts and like empowering them in a way that I wasn't empowered. And then that person was like, I would like to be a boss. And I was like, okay. So I had that knowledge already. And then when I moved on to my own space, I really had to be like, okay, so I kind of felt like I gave all my A plus material to that studio, which I no longer have any affiliation with. So I was like, okay, now really, and I will say that that experience, as uncomfortable and difficult as it was, allowed me to dial down and be like, oh no, actually, this is what I value. This is what we're going to be about. Get on board or not, dealer's choice. But it really forced me to look inwards and be like, what do I want to create? Why do I want to create it? And who do I want to create it for? And because I think it'll be the best impact to my community. So yeah, we're a lot smaller right now. But the integrity is there and the human side is there. And it's just so lovely and inspiring and like vessel filling for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can imagine. It sounds like it's very values driven, right? So that could be a very, I don't know, it's such an intrinsically rewarding experience when you're doing something that you feel good about, right? Like what the output is, what the input is.
Yeah.
What is it that you actually like about the work itself?
So, the creativity is really part of my favorite. That sounds so lame and so simplistic, but I've really learned, because I do work in a competitive artistic world. So our kids do go to competition, which is ridiculous and silly. And I'm also an adjudicator. So I sit on both sides of the table as a creator and then a judge of creation, which is very silly. But I think I've really learned to enjoy the process as opposed to, I want to have this outcome to prove my worth to the parents, to the clients, to the kids. Now I find just as much joy in creating, in the creative process and the journey and the time in the studio as I do when we're at competition. And that makes, however it falls out at competition, a lot more manageable, because I'm like, well, I know we had a lot of fun making this. So like, okay, these three people on this panel this weekend aren't into it. Cool. Let's go back and like keep having fun in the studio. So the creativity in music is always like my driving factor, and the space in the studio is like happy times.
That's great. Thank you. I imagine it's a difficult dance, pun intended, between like the creative and competitive, and also when you have paying clients like parents who sometimes have a different kind of investment in expectations of their child.
Oh yeah. Yeah, we love a 3-year-old parent who's like, why isn't my child doing pirouettes? You're like, your child cannot skip. So that's where like you kind of become this umbrella of like, yeah. But I do think there's been a bit of a swing where the clients aren't as honored, and a lot of studios are just pushing, do this, do this, do this, to a lot of financial strain, emotional strain. And I'm not into that really, because I'm like, they are essentially clients. This is like a patronage, if you will, essentially. Like they're believing in me and the studio and what we can do. So we have an obligation to honor towards them as well. Not everybody sees it that way, but I think it's a two-way street, and I don't mind it now. I'm getting a lot better dealing with parents. And I think also too, we say, this is who we are, this is what we believe. If you're on board, everything's going to be great. It's as soon as somebody who's like, oh yeah, I'm on board, and then there's a little bit of tension or friction down the line, and like, oh, they kind of fib to us, and like they're not really on board, and that's where it can get a little bit hairy. But that's why now I just really stand in like, this is what we believe, this is what we do, so that when that sort of tense conversation comes up, it's just like, yo, you know what you signed up for, and maybe this isn't the best space for you, maybe it is, maybe we can figure it out together.
Great. Yeah, thank you. So Kimia, how about you? What is it that you like about what you do? I mean, you're studying, you still have your own practice. What is it that gets you excited about your day to day?
Um, it's just like doing and learning. If it was up to me, I will stay like in academia for as long as I can, for like do like multiple PhDs. It's just like that hunger for learning and getting opportunities, and like that's why I say I regret not taking cognitive science, because now like part of my practice is like how do we perceive music and what happens to our brain and perception and memory and emotions. Because at the end of the day, I feel like everything we do, like even art in society, everything is interconnected in all of our activities on a day-to-day basis. Um, but I feel like I'm diverting from your question, but it's just like the doing part, the learning part. Yeah.
Great. Yeah. Thank you. Milton, how about you?
I think it's the fluidity of form. And so coming from SFU being like, yeah, you're trained as an actor and as a devised theater maker, but now also think about directing, but also now think about maybe you're a dancer, maybe you're a filmmaker, maybe. And so having that background and being taught that kind of formal courage of just like, just try whatever, really deeply embedded itself into like how I identify as an artist, but also like the things I love about kind of waking up in the morning and tinkering. And so I find that like behind the computer currently, this is the thing that makes me really happy, which is getting behind Touch Designer and then being able to make interactive media and making the choices. And in some ways, it stems from wanting to also be in a room with my friends in a workshop and just trying new things on a stage. And now the stage is different and different and different. So I think that's the thing I love about my practice. But to be also completely honest, I've been wrestling a little bit with the fact of being so lucky to tour. Brian Eno said in a generative film recently that like touring for him became a waste of time at a certain point because it distracted him from being able to do the tinkering he wanted to do as an artist. And so just seeing the kind of costs and the benefits of different choices that are made, and at what point do you want to just continue going in a different direction? And I think those are things that we'll all come across at different points in our lives in varying capacities. But I think that fluidity of like, well, now I'll go in this direction is something that I take with me very seriously.
Yeah, that's great. And I love how you've come back to this quite a few times. It's like to just try, right? Not to allow yourself to be confined to to a single form or to a single maybe ambition. I'm curious, like in terms of your experiences that you've had, like where have you found the greatest challenges and where have your greatest lessons been?
It's a really basic one. I think communication. And I think hearing a little bit from Leslie as well, like, yeah, it's like when you collaborate with someone for a show or a piece, like that's, you can do it. Like, anyone can be nice and like just go on with any of your collaborative endeavors for like a couple weeks. But to go in on it with someone for the long run for many years and then to like incubate basically an organizational baby with them is a big commitment. And it's not something that should ever dissuade you from trying at all. In fact, I think you like definitely just hop in, but just always to keep an eye on the communication side because like any good relationship, like good communication is really key, and that goes accordingly to my second point about that, which is scaling your ambitions and scaling like what any particular project is. I think I've definitely been bit in the past by like trying to dream so large that I was also not thinking realistically about the capacities of myself, about my collaborators, and those things can come back in varying ways. And so iterative process where like let's build little sections at a time, where like let's scale big, but then let's scale back down. Just keeping an eye on those things is not super difficult, but sometimes it's easy to forget when you're just caught up in the energy of like, oh, we're in the middle of making things and everything's fine. Um, but I think the long game and the big picture are things that anyone will come across as they get older in life. And I think the earlier you recognize those things, the sooner you can make really great habits that will serve everyone around you and yourself for the long haul. Because it's all relational. All of this, like institutions, sure, but then behind those institutions, when you ask people, it's humans trying their best. So don't be afraid of just asking the humans who are trying their best to look at you and just see you eye to eye.
Yeah, that sounds like really good advice in creating kind of a sustainable practice, right? Because if you're just shooting for the stars all the time, you can burn out, or you can have difficulty seeing the returns on that work when it takes you so long to get to a certain point. But if you are building upon, like with iterations, like you've noted, you can see those small successes you continue to grow. And it also probably allows you to pivot, right?
Mhm.
If you're learning as you go and kind of adjusting to where that new goal may make more sense. Yeah,
Totally, yeah.
that's great. Yeah. So around communication, which is fantastic, it's so true. Communication is such well, it's important in everything that we do, right? I'm wondering about finding collaborators. How do you find collaborators, and how do you determine whether which projects make sense for different collaborators?
Yeah. I think in our contemporary state, we don't often watch our peers enough, in my opinion. Like everyone's trying to do some wild things. People have all these ideas that no one ever asks them about. Panel discussions are too short to actually get into the meat of it. And so I really do prize in like being able to watch super carefully and being really invested in my own community in ways that are not just I'm going to go see your show and then never talk to you about it. But I think that as time goes on, you'll see the people who are in it to stay with it, and to be in that community, and you'll see like the people who are you're going to spend the rest of your lives with, in all these beautiful ways. So trying to find out like who's the best fit for whatever project will actually make itself pretty clear when you have a sense of like what you want to make. That's how I operate, but some other people will also be like, I want to work with that person, and then we'll figure it out as we go. Both those are completely fine. It just depends on your working practice. But all of that starts with paying attention to who's around you, what they're interested in, and also where their hearts are. Because sometimes people are making things they don't really want to make, and it just takes one person to say, like, "Do you want to try this thing with me?" to really open them up. And I've seen that many, many times with different collaborators, and it's all taken us in different directions, and we still are watching each other in ways that I think enrich us all and lift up all boats at the same time.
It's such a maybe a basic question, but how do you watch that? Like, where do you discover the people that you think should be, added to that list of continued kind of observation?
Yeah. I think everyone's reaching out as much as possible. There's like funding available for mentorships and everything else. I did start and I put it in the chat for people currently here, but videocan.ca is our archive, and it is an attempt to try and make it easier to see people, not even just from our geographic region, but people within Canada in its very kind of plastic and elastic kind of understandings. Um, but I think that watching comes from not even just like showing up. Showing up is a big part of it, but it's also from like asking questions and then being genuinely curious and interested in someone. And even if you can't be there, just to reach out. Sometimes it's a text or it's an email or it's a phone call. But I feel like those things, the times that I've received and the times that I've been able to do it for other people, um, that's what watching in its general sense feels like. It's being committed to encountering someone again and again.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Thank you. So, Kimia, to you, what do you think the biggest challenges that you've experienced are one of them, and what have you learned from those challenges?
Um, for me, it was like reevaluating why I'm doing what I'm doing. Because the why, like, I've always followed like the next thing, like what is the next thing, what is the next thing. And then 2 years ago, I went to like this contemporary music festival for 2 weeks at 5 concerts a day. And like, I don't know if anybody listens to like, probably do, but like experimental contemporary music, which is all like noise, but that is exactly what I did, what I still do. But I never questioned why am I even doing that, and why am I composing? Because honestly, I'm still like, I was like, why do I even make music that like it has an audience of like 20 people usually, and like a lot of people don't even consider it's music, which is valid because like I like we make experimental music, and but that experiment happens in the expense of the audience, and not rather than like within our practice. So what I've come to the conclusion, like I want to make music as a service to the society, not as a way, like, because I never thought like I put my soul in it. Like, it's not about me or my story. Who am I to tell my story to like take paid like audience or paying tickets? So I don't know, like the why was the biggest challenge, and like I had to question like every note I put on the paper, like why am I even putting this note, and what is my role within a society, and why does our career, like what has happened like within the experimental contemporary new music scene, which is so niche. Why do we not connect to the other industry? Why is it so hard to like break the wall between the academic and academia kind of music and the more social and engaging experience of like live performance and musical experiences? Yeah, that was so far that has been the biggest challenge, I think, because everything else is like given challenge. Like, I mean, finding the why is a challenge, but like everything else, sorry, somebody came in, I had booked the room. But yeah, I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, well, that's the biggest question, isn't it? Why? Why
Yeah.
put all of your effort and your work and your blood, sweat, and tears into something? And it's a continued question. It
Yeah,
can be like the why on the grand scheme and the why to the micro.
exactly.
Yeah.
And it will happen I feel like every 5 years that will come up, and then you reevaluate your values. You might, like, I don't know, in 5 years' time, I might not even be composing. And I think I'll be fine if I make that decision in 5 years' time.
Mm.
I trust that my future self will have made the right decision.
Yeah. Well, you can only make the decision with the information you have, right? Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Leslie, how about you? You've talked with us already about some of your challenges. What do you think? That sounded terrible about some of the challenges you've experienced. What have you learned? What can you share with our group?
Oh, yeah, I think challenges come hand in hand with choosing an artistic career. It doesn't have to, but I think just knowing that that's like part of the kind of like Kimia said, like the experiment, and that it not to look at it as a negative. Like I kind of always knew that this was going to be the route, um, and that there would be challenges, and that for me personally, like Milton had said, like to be curious, like that's such a huge part of it, and that those challenges, whatever they might be, are like for me, they're always a puzzle. I'm like, okay, how can I put this puzzle together? Like, this is just one weird shaped piece. I don't really like this piece, but it fits within this puzzle. I can't see it right now. I'll probably see it like in 5 years and then I'll reevaluate, like Kimia was saying. Um, I think challenges have been finding the spaces where I fit as opposed to contorting myself into places so that I would fit. Um, the desire to work, the desire to help, the desire to be a part of something bigger, and sort of having these big ideas and then being sort of seen as, oh, you're just here to do this. That has been quite challenging, and I think really led me to moving into my own space as opposed to working for people. I'd always sort of wanted to really be a helpmeet. Like I'd kind of seen myself as sort of an associate or an assistant to someone because I know that that's where a lot of my skills are. But yeah, the challenges are just a really annoying piece of the puzzle that I now get to be curious about. And I just get to look at it. I see it all as information. And I try not to put any value judgments on it, which is very difficult. and I try to remind myself that this challenge right now is offering me a structure to work within. It's not here to like destroy me, even though sometimes it feels like that this really will help me adapt and change. And I know that something new and ideally better will come out of it. But it's just an opportunity to, yeah, get curious and reevaluate and then move forward with that information.
That's great. Yeah, thank you. What's the saying? Life is pain. Life is yeah, it's just what it is. It's challenging, right? Like you're going to experience challenges. They may be small, they may be big, but hopefully they open you up into a new path that is a better fit. And those challenges have been resolved or minimized. Great. Thank you, everybody. I'd love to open up to questions from anybody else in the group. And panelists, feel free, jump in if you have any questions that you'd like to ask one another. I certainly have some more questions I'm happy to ask, but please do use the chat or raise your hand.
I had a question to my
Milton?
fellow panelists, which is like, what do you look for in a great mentee?
Okay, well, maybe I'll jump on there. I feel only because I feel like all my kids, anybody I work with is potentially like a mentee. Like I'm always striving for their best. Like I'm just such a huge cheerleader of people, which again, I sound so Pollyanna, but it's kind of true. Like I really just, if you're in it, if you're like, yeah, this is what I'm looking for, I'm like, cool, I'm here to walk with you, to help you and like cheerlead you because I felt, especially as a out of coming right out of school and not having made a lot of professional connections with my instructors who could have hired me. I was like, oh, I want to be that for somebody else. Like I needed that, and so now I want to be that. So honestly, like if someone comes to me and says, I'm looking for help, I'm looking for guidance, I'm like, let's go. We're in this together. Like if you're on board, I'm on board.
Hi, could I ask a question?
Yeah.
Is this working? Okay,
Yep, go
hi.
for it.
I'm Ella. I'm in my third year for visual arts, so I wasn't actually sure if I'm because it said School of Contemporary Communication and Technology, so I wasn't sure if I was actually included in this, but now I understand it's with SCA students, so I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah, I guess based on Leslie's question, I don't know how I would be able to gain professional experience when coming out of university and just, or I guess in a sense, how do you become like almost self-entrepreneur in a sense? Because that's how a lot of artists are. So if there's any, like, how do you gain the experience of writing grants or creating your own studio and all that? Seems very daunting. I don't know if I want to become a self-entrepreneur artist, but anyways, yeah.
Yeah, one, I feel you, I hear you, I am you, like 100%. Um, I think one, this program will be like really great, obviously at connecting students with people out there. Um, I don't want to paint anything with a broad brush that may or may not be true. I do think there is, I would say the 80% chance of you being self-employed slash an entrepreneur is probably higher than necessarily being hired. That doesn't mean that it's not possible. And like Milton, for example, created these collaborations with other people so that you're not really in it alone, which I think is incredibly helpful. Creating collectives or creating groups together to work on that. And like, okay, graduating Leslie hates what like senior Leslie is going to say right now. Because if I was to give myself advice, I'd say look into, just be aware of if there is information on entrepreneurship that you can learn a little bit, or even become familiar with, like, what are the rules if you're self-employed versus an employee, what does that mean, or familiarizing yourself with like the CRA guidelines. There's like a link and you can like read it, just so that you sort of have a little bit of information. And as horrible as this is also going to sound, it's like it is a trial by fire, so you do kind of figure it out step by step, and you take this one gig or job, and then it builds. So just really starting at the beginning and just take that first step, and it will automatically, I'm not sure the other panelists, you can also contradict me if that's not true, but I think like just taking that first step, and it will automatically sort of take you on a game board, and you don't start unless you want to. That, you know what I mean? Like there's a starting spot. So don't feel intimidated, don't feel overwhelmed.
I think one thing that helped me was like knowing and accepting that I do not know. And like knowing that, okay, I don't know. And there's so many people in this world that they think they know and they actually don't know. And knowing that you go into there and you like, when I was like undergrad graduate, I was like, oh my God, these are amazing people. Some of them are amazing, but like then you see like some people like they actually don't know. And that is totally fine. So knowing with that openness and that curiosity and being open to fail, I think gives you so much liberty and like it just like disarms you. It's like, okay, I don't know, but like I'm gonna learn and I'm open to learning and I will ask questions and I will ask like there's no such thing as stupid questions, but like that's what I tell them. Like I will ask silly things that I think it might be obvious to people and it might not actually be that obvious. And honestly, by just doing, as Leslie said, just like do that one step and it will lead you to the next step and show up, do internships, do a lot when you're that. What helped me after graduation was like having done a lot of internships, a lot of like volunteer work, free work, like just do that's investment on your future, like what you do. You might not get paid, you might not be honored, and that is fine because like when people start a business, they put that like seed money, they put that money. So you're putting that time on yourself so that you can, I don't know what's the English word, but like you can pick up the seeds harvest it later.
Yeah, I want to add on to that to say, Ella, you have a superpower in front of you, which is that you might not know all the rules as they are. And that is a great thing, I think, as an artist, that especially for like clowns don't know the rules, and that's how they're able to defy so many rules. It's because they can do this little dance and kind of get away with it. There's great balance to come along with people who will just try things, as Leslie and Kimmy are saying. You just try and then you just see how it works. And oftentimes, more than not, actually, you'll find that it will work in a strange way. It'll open something up, even if that thing doesn't work. Something else will open up inside you. So like it's something that I highly encourage to continuously break rules by just not always knowing the full extent of it. And I don't mean like go burn things down, but unless that's your art practice, no. But there's something powerful in always having a mentor or friend who's going to encourage you to just take the kind of silly route and just try something, because that's always just confidence boosting. But the rest of it's truly just taking that step and just trying to do the thing that doesn't make sense. And too many young artists, I think, these days are doing things that make sense according to systems that are currently in place. But those systems are kind of meant to maintain instead of innovate. And that maintenance looks like a lot of the same art over and over, which begs that question that Kimmy is asking, why? So I would love to see a younger generation break the rules and actually not entirely listen and do the same things as mentors, because you're not meant to. And that's why I think as a mentee, I'm always looking for mentees who will teach me something I didn't know about either. So it's a two-way street.
Wow, you guys are so motivational. Thank you.
Sick.
Yeah, I know. I was also kind of wondering, I guess you have to know a bit of, yeah, to just stumble into something, or you just have to try, I guess. But also to get familiar with, yeah, I guess CRA, taxes, and how to be an entrepreneur. But thank you.
Yeah, you'll find those things as you go along. Like I found
Yeah.
my accountant is actually someone I went to school with. Like she happened to be already a grandmother in our classes, and she became all of our accountants. And so
Oh my
happy
God.
to send her name along. But those things can be figured out. And yes, you can learn how to go about those things.
Yeah.
I would not worry that much right off the bat to like, oh, my taxes.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
My mom owns an accounting firm. I think I'll be good for
Oh, you'll be
now.
fine.
Like, we
You'll
need
be
your
fine.
contact.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, she does usually stunt people.
Cool.
That's
And
perfect.
also,
yeah.
yeah. And if so recognize that you've already got a little bit of a network right there with the fact that your mom it can support you in not in just being a mom, but in that way. And then finding that circle, because that's the reality is you want to focus on what you want to do. So then find the people around you to kind of create this rainbow to support you in those other ways. Through whatever the skills that you don't have, that's where we can lift up others around us who those are their skills.
Okay, thank you.
Do you have any other questions, Ella, or anyone else?
I would encourage anyone watching this to also just be like, yes, there's the formal mentorship program, but if you have a question for someone that you're interested in their work or you have questions specifically for them, just send an email. Like again, everyone's human, and like if someone sends me an email, I will do my best to respond in a timely manner. Right now is not great, but I will do my best. And I think that's the kind of listening and being part of community because we are smaller than I think, especially as a young student coming out of school. Like everything seems so big, but you'll see the same people over and over again, and then in like give it 5 or 10 years, and you'll realize, oh, these are people this is my community, whatever that looks like, whether or not you become a teacher or like some other kind of worker that's culturally engaged. Like it's not always just about being the presenting touring artist. So connect.
Right. Yeah. And I think from certainly all of the conversations I've had with our alumni, they are so generous and they want to help and lift up the students and our emerging alumni. So don't hesitate to reach out an email, I don't know, any other platform that you can find and connect with people. People are good.
Mhm.
All right, we just have one last minute, so I'm just very quickly going to share a few slides here about the FCAT Mentors program, just to answer any questions and hopefully provide a little bit more information should you be interested in participating. So this FCAT Mentors program, it is about connecting current students within our program. So that's including the SCA, CID, School of Communication, Publishing Program, and Center for Digital Media, or a recent alumnus, so someone who's graduated within the last 2 years. We want to help to connect you with somebody who has some professional practice or community practice. And it's really for the purpose of career guidance. So this isn't academic advising. It's about taking whatever your goals may be upon graduating or leaving the university, sharing experiences, discussing those goals, and the mentor will be there to help you make some steps towards accomplishing those goals or moving towards them. We're accepting applications on a rolling basis. So as we receive applications, we're looking to make the matches. We're recommending that mentees and mentors meet at least once a month for 1 hour per month. But that is totally up to you and how much capacity each of you has and even what your goals may be. We're setting the contracts and mentorship matches for a 4-month period. But if you have met the goals that you're hoping to accomplish with the mentorship match, you can end that contract a little bit earlier. Or if you're doing so well, you're loving working together, you can renew, you can extend, you can expand. It is totally up to what works best for both the mentee and the mentor. And the mentorship start dates will be dependent on the capacity and when the mentee and the mentor are ready to get going. Like I mentioned, mentees, we're looking for current students who have at least 60 units or about halfway through their degree, as well as alumni who have graduated within the last 2 years. Those are people who can apply as mentees, and mentors have at least 2 years of experience since graduation. And how to apply, so it's all outlined on the FCAT Mentors webpage. For mentees, we're asking for an advising transcript. There's a risk waiver form, just recognizing that there are risks in, of course, having any communication with anybody. And there's an online application form that will ask for some information just to help us understand what you are looking for in terms of a mentee and mentorship match. For the mentors, we ask for a volunteer agreement form because our alumni, our mentors are doing this out of the goodness of their hearts. It is free. They're not accepting any money for this, which is fantastic. And there's also a risk waiver form and an online application form as well. And let's see, just finally, oh, that's it. If you have any more questions, you can certainly send them to me. I'm happy to direct any of the questions, emails to our alumni who have participated on this panel. And do just let me know if you have any questions or comments. This is a new program, so we are adapting and learning as we go and making changes to make sure that we are supporting as many current students and alumni as possible. Any final questions, comments?
I was
Thanks
just
for having
wondering
us.
what,
Oh,
sorry.
no, Ella,
What
go
do
ahead.
you mean by goals? It says to complete a goal. What are some
I'm gonna
examples
back it
of
up.
that?
What, like here when I say discuss professional goals? Yeah, so what do you want to do upon graduation? Like, how do you want to dedicate your time, spend your time? It doesn't need to be anything that is, really like fleshed out. It can be like you're just looking to like find take that first step after graduation. You just want to know how to spend your time. It is up to you how you would define how you want to spend your time after graduation.
Wait, so this program can be for people that have graduated already?
Yeah, yeah, if you've
Oh,
graduated
okay.
within the last 2 years, for sure. Because sometimes that's when it's hardest, right? Like now you're not just
Yeah.
studying, you're looking to put your feet on the ground and get going with career.
Okay. I was thinking of going back to school after this program though, so I don't know if I would still count after.
I mean, like we've seen, like with Kimmy's experience, there are lots of alumni that will continue on with their studies. If you just want to talk with somebody about how they made that decision or what they're hoping to do with their graduate studies and what they have learned that may be applicable for you and help you in making your own decision. I mean, information is information, right? You get to pick and choose how you use whatever you are learning or what other people have learned. Um, if it would be valuable for you, then I think it's a great program.
Okay, thank you. There's a
Yeah.
question in the chat too.
Oh,
Uh,
I've totally missed it.
It
Thank you.
just came in.
Is there a list of active mentees to select from, or mentors? So the mentors, like we are matching as we go along. So I'm not sharing individual names of mentors, just because I want to make sure that we are connecting people based on skills gaps. Certainly, like if we participate in this panel and you're like, yes, this person like really resonates with me, you can let me know and say like I'd really be interested in a mentorship with X person, and that's great. But I'm not sharing publicly a list of mentors. You're welcome. Any final thoughts? I know we're 5 minutes past, so I appreciate if people have to jump off the call. Any final thoughts or comments from either our audience members or from our panelists?
There's a long game. I think I would always say like yes, there's this talk which is only an hour. There's a mentorship, but I think there's so much to learn and it's a lifelong thing. And so I think the best case scenario of mentorships is always just a friendship that like you're just going to
Mm.
continue learning side by side. And that's not to put pressure on like I gotta find the best friend for the rest of my life. But we're all interconnected. So just reach out sooner than later. And I no hesitation and no jokes like send emails just to connect with people and not even just to learn from them but just like to be in a circle with other people. So you're not alone. If anything feels daunting, like other people have done similar things and we can all learn from each other and would benefit from it. So thank you in advance for reaching out.
There's a question, where can we find your contacts? Yeah, so Milton, Leslie, Kimia, if you're comfortable sharing contact information, please let me know and I can either, or you can pop it right in the chat, that's easy, or we can send it out to people at request. Great, thank you. Great. Okay, well, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Milton, Leslie, Kimia.
Thank you. This was
Thank you
great.
for putting this together.
Yeah, thank
Yeah.
you. This was so I'm so inspired by everyone on the panel. I'm just like, oh, this is just gonna get me going on a Monday. I'm so excited.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Okay, have a great day, everybody, and we'll be in touch.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.